Rachel, you're not sitting at the head table. We need that seat for Kevin's business partner. You understand, right? You always understand. My mother said it while adjusting the centerpiece at the rehearsal dinner like she was discussing the weather forecast. Across the room, my brother Kevin raised his champagne glass at me with that grin, the one he'd been perfecting since we were kids. The one that said, "I win again and you can't do anything about it." My father was already deep in conversation with Kevin's father-in-law, laughing too loud, trying too hard. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I simply picked up my clutch, walked to the valet stand, and handed over my ticket. The attendant brought my car around in 3 minutes. I was on the highway in 5. They probably didn't notice I was gone for at least an hour. They assumed my silence meant I'd accepted my place. They had no idea it meant I'd finally chosen a different one. Have you ever been the person your family calls when they need something fixed, but never when they're celebrating? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. My name is Rachel. I'm 32, and for most of my life, I played a role my family never bothered to write a script for the responsible one, who nobody respected for being responsible. It started when I was 14. My father sat me down at the kitchen table one Tuesday evening and told me that since I was the smart one, I would be handling the family's bills. Not helping, handling. He slid the checkbook across the table like he was passing a baton in a relay race he didn't want to run. Every month after that, I balanced their accounts, called the insurance company, negotiated with the credit card companies when they overspent. I was 14 years old, arguing with a collections agent about a late fee on a Visa card my father had maxed out buying Kevin a drum set he never learned to play. That same year, Kevin got a brand new dirt bike for his 16th birthday. $4,000. I know the exact number because I saw the charge on the statement I was managing. When my birthday came around 2 months later, my mother handed me a card with a $20 bill inside and said, "Buy yourself something practical." I bought a used calculator for my AP statistics class. I told myself it didn't hurt. That was the first lie I learned to tell convincingly. But here's the thing about being the family bookkeeper at 14, it didn't just teach me about money. It taught me how to read people through their spending. Every dollar tells a story, and my family's story was painfully simple. Kevin was the investment. I was the overhead. Kevin was loud, charming, and spectacularly average at everything he attempted. He dropped out of community college twice, crashed 2 cars before he was 21, and bounced between jobs like a pinball. But in my parents' eyes, he was always one opportunity away from greatness. He just needed the right break, the right connection, the right push. And they were willing to bankroll every single push, no matter how many times he fell flat. I, meanwhile, put myself through college on scholarships and a waitressing job that left my feet aching every night. I graduated summa cum laude with an accounting degree. I got my CPA at 24. I was recruited by one of the top forensic accounting firms in the state by 26. None of this earned me a seat at the head table. None of this made my mother's eyes light up the way Kevin's half-baked business pitches did. When Kevin announced his engagement to Megan, a perfectly nice woman who seemed to have no idea what she was marrying into, my parents reacted like he'd been nominated for a Nobel Prize. My mother cried. My father bear-hugged him. They immediately started talking about the event of the decade. I was sitting right there at Sunday dinner when it happened. Nobody asked me how my week was. I had just closed the biggest fraud case of my career, a 7-figure embezzlement scheme at a logistics company. I'd been up for 40 hours straight reviewing ledgers. I had dark circles under my eyes and coffee stains on my sleeve. Nobody noticed. What I noticed, though, was the look on my father's face when Kevin said the wedding would cost around $80,000. It wasn't shock. It wasn't hesitation. It was the glazed, determined expression of a gambler pushing all his chips to the center of the table. I'd seen that look before. I'd seen it every month in their bank statements since I was 14, and it terrified me. So I did what I do. I followed the money. 2 weeks after the announcement, I sat in my apartment, the one I'd bought with my own savings, no cosigner, no family help, and pulled up the county assessor's website. I typed in my parents' address. The results made my stomach drop. They had taken out a home equity line of credit against the house, pulling out $60,000 of the equity they'd built over 25 years. But that wasn't all. I checked the state's UCC filings. My father had also taken a personal loan against his small landscaping business, $25,000 at 14% interest. For a man who made maybe $55,000 a year in a good season, that was financial suicide. I called my mother that night, keeping my voice casual. "Hey, Mom, are you and Dad doing okay with money? I can help with the wedding planning if you need." She cut me off before I could finish. We're fine, Rachel. Kevin's wedding is an investment. Once he and Dan get the business going, everything pays for itself. Don't be negative. Dan was Kevin's soon-to-be father-in-law, who owned a chain of auto repair shops across the county and had been dangling a management position in front of Kevin like a carrot on a string for 2 years. The entire wedding, I realized, wasn't about love. It was a transaction. My parents were buying Kevin's ticket into Dan's business empire. They were betting their house, their retirement, their entire financial stability on the hope that Dan would give Kevin a corner office and a 6-figure salary. What they didn't understand, what people blinded by favoritism never understand, is that Kevin didn't need an opportunity. He needed accountability. And those are two very different things. The escalation started 6 weeks before the wedding. Kevin called me on a Wednesday night at 11 p.m. I was reviewing case files for work. Rach, I need you to call the florist tomorrow. They're trying to charge extra for gardenias. Handle it. Not a question, not a request. A command, delivered with the casual authority of someone who has never been told no by the people who should have told him no the most. I'm not your wedding planner, Kevin, I said. You're good with numbers and negotiating. Just do it. It'll take you 5 minutes. He hung up before I could respond. The next day, my mother called. Kevin says you refuse to help with the florist. Rachel, this is his big day. Why do you always have to make everything about you? I didn't make anything about me. I said no to an unreasonable request at 11 p.m. on a work night. You know your brother is under pressure. Dan is watching how this wedding comes together. It reflects on Kevin's ability to manage a large operation. If this goes well, Dan is going to make Kevin a regional manager. Do you understand what that means for this family? I understood perfectly. It meant my parents had convinced themselves that a $85,000 wedding would somehow generate a return on investment. It was the same logic that had justified the dirt bike, the 2 crashed cars, the failed businesses, and every other expensive catastrophe Kevin had left in his wake. Kevin was always one big moment away from proving them right. And as long as they believed that, they could avoid the terrifying alternative that they'd spent 30 years and a small fortune propping up a man who would never stand on his own. 3 weeks before the wedding, they showed up at my apartment. All 3 of them. Kevin walked in first, waiting for an invitation, wearing a sports coat with the price tag still tucked inside the collar. I could see it. $475. I said nothing. Where's Nate? Kevin asked, looking around my living room like he was appraising it for resale value. Out plunging a drain somewhere? Nate is my husband. He's a contractor. He builds things. Kitchens, decks, additions, sometimes entire houses. He's quiet, steady, and kind in a way that my family mistakes for weakness. Nate's at work, I said. What do you want? We need to talk about your attitude, my father said, settling into my couch without being asked. Your brother needs help coordinating vendors. You have the organizational skills. Use them for something that matters. My attitude is fine. My answer is still no. Kevin picked up a framed photo of Nate and me from the bookshelf. Our wedding photo. We'd gotten married at the courthouse 2 years earlier. 12 people. A potluck reception in our backyard. My parents had come, stayed for 45 minutes, and left early because Kevin had a flat tire across town. Kevin hadn't come at all. He looked at the photo and smirked. You know, Rach, it's kind of sad. You married a guy who works with his hands and you push paper for a living. Meanwhile, I'm about to be running a multi-million-dollar operation. You could have been part of something bigger if you weren't so stubborn. He set the photo face down on the shelf. My mother jumped in. Kevin's right. Dan is grooming him for leadership. This wedding is basically a corporate event. We need it to be perfect. You owe it to this family. I owe this family? I repeated. Yes, my father said firmly. We raised you. We fed you. We kept a roof over your head. The least you can do is help your brother when he needs it. I looked at the 3 of them. My mother, who hadn't called me on my birthday last year. My father, who had never once asked about my career. My brother, who had just insulted my husband and turned our wedding photo face down in our own home. Fine, I said. The word felt like swallowing a stone. I'll be at the wedding. Good girl, my father said, patting Kevin on the shoulder as they headed for the door. See? She just needed to be reminded what family means. They left thinking they'd won. They left thinking the quiet daughter had once again folded under pressure. They didn't know that Nate wasn't plunging a drain. He was in a meeting with his attorney, finalizing the purchase of his 14th property, a historic estate called Whitfield House, a venue that happened to be the exact location where Kevin had just booked his wedding. Nate had been building his real estate portfolio quietly for 6 years. He'd started with one fixer-upper, flipped it, and reinvested every dollar. He now owned commercial and residential properties across 3 counties. My family had no idea. They never asked what Nate was working on. They just saw the work boots and the calloused hands and made their assumptions. And they certainly didn't know about my job. "Push paper," Kevin had said. I closed the door behind them and walked to my desk. I opened my laptop and logged into a secure portal. The screen displayed my credentials. Analyst R. Torres, that's my married name, the one I use professionally. Role: Senior Forensic Investigator. Client: Mitchell and Pratt Holdings. Engagement: Internal Fraud Examination, Fisher Auto Group. 7 locations across the county. Owned and operated by Dan Fisher, Kevin's future father-in-law, the man whose business my parents were betting their house on. I hadn't sought this case out. My firm had been retained by Dan's silent business partner, a man named Tom Pratt, who had noticed irregularities in the company's books for the past 18 months. Revenue was up on paper, but cash flow was down. Expenses were ballooning in ways that didn't match the operation. Tom suspected someone inside was siphoning money, and he wanted an outside expert to find out who. When I opened the files and saw the name Kevin Torres listed as assistant manager of the flagship location, my maiden name, my brother, I went to my supervising partner immediately. I disclosed the relationship. I offered to recuse myself. My partner consulted with the client's legal team. Their response surprised me. They wanted me to stay on. Kevin used his wife's family name, Fisher, at work. Nobody in the company knew he was my brother, and more importantly, Tom Pratt didn't trust anyone inside the organization. He wanted someone with no loyalty to the Fisher family name. I was, ironically, exactly what they needed. So I did my job. They wanted me to be useful. I would be useful in ways they never imagined. I started the deep audit on a Monday morning, sitting in a windowless conference room at my firm's office with 3 monitors, a pot of coffee, and every financial record Fisher Auto Group had generated in the past 2 years. I wasn't looking for typos or rounding errors. Those are accidents. I was hunting for patterns, because patterns are where people hide the truth. It took me 4 hours to find the first thread. The flagship location where Kevin worked had been ordering auto parts from a vendor called Summit Precision Supply, normal enough auto shops order parts. But Summit Precision was billing at 30 to 40% above market rate for standard components. A brake rotor that should cost $45 was being invoiced at $68. Multiply that across hundreds of orders per month, and the overcharges added up to roughly $8,000 to $12,000 every month. I ran Summit Precision through the state business registry. It had been incorporated 14 months ago. The registered agent was a name I didn't recognize, Derek Holt. I searched deeper. Derek Holt shared a mailing address with a P.O. box that also appeared in the personal records of one Kevin Fisher, my brother's work alias. I kept pulling the thread. Summit Precision had no website, no warehouse, no employees, and no presence anywhere except on Fisher Auto Group invoices. It was a shell company. Kevin was approving inflated invoices from a fake vendor he controlled, and the overpayment was flowing directly into an account linked to Derek Holt, which, when I traced the banking records through the subpoena Tom's lawyers had obtained, routed straight to a personal checking account in Kevin's real name. Over 14 months, the total amount skimmed was approximately $155,000. I sat back in my chair and pressed my palms against my eyes. $155,000. Stolen from the father of the woman he was about to marry. From the man my parents believed would make Kevin rich. The irony was so sharp, it could draw blood. But Kevin wasn't working alone. That was the part that made my stomach turn. The purchase orders were approved by Kevin, but the payments were processed by the bookkeeper at the flagship location, a woman named Donna Vickers. When I cross-referenced her personal deposits with the payout schedule from Summit Precision, I found a consistent pattern. Every month that an inflated invoice was paid, Donna received a separate deposit of $1,500 into a savings account at a different bank. Kevin was paying her to look the other way. And then I found the emails. Not on company servers, Kevin wasn't quite that stupid, but through metadata recovered from a shared cloud drive that Donna had accidentally synced with her work computer, one message from Kevin to Donna stood out. It read, and I am paraphrasing to protect the legal case. Once the wedding locks everything down and I'm officially family, the old man will never question me. We double the volume after January. He wasn't just stealing from Dan Fisher. He was planning to steal more. The wedding wasn't an endpoint. It was an escalation strategy. Marry into the family, gain deeper trust, and widen the pipeline. I compiled everything: bank records, invoices, the shell company registration, the email metadata, the payment trail to Donna. It filled a binder 2 inches thick. I delivered it to my supervising partner, who delivered it to Tom Pratt's legal team. They scheduled a meeting with Dan Fisher for the Monday after the wedding, but I had one more thing to prepare. I opened a fresh envelope, heavy cream stationery, the kind I use for formal correspondence. Inside, I placed a single printed page, a summary of the fraud, sourced entirely from public records, and the shell company filing that anyone could find with a basic search. Nothing from the confidential audit, just enough breadcrumbs for Dan Fisher to see the picture himself. On the outside of the envelope, I wrote 2 words in neat handwriting. For Dan. The wedding day arrived on the first Saturday of October. The leaves at Whitfield House had turned amber and crimson, and the grounds looked like something from a magazine. I wore a slate gray dress, elegant, understated, deliberate. Nate wore a navy suit that fit him like it was custom made, because it was. We walked through the iron gates and up the gravel path lined with white lanterns. We didn't look like guests. We looked like we belonged there, which was accurate, since Nate's name was on the deed. Kevin spotted us immediately from the cocktail area. He was already flushed from drinking, his tie loosened, holding court with a group of Dan's associates. "Well, look who cleaned up," he called out, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Nate, buddy, did you have to rent that suit? Or did Rachel buy it for you with her little spreadsheet money?" A few people laughed uncomfortably. Nate said nothing. He just adjusted his cufflink and offered me his arm. "Nice venue," I said to Kevin, keeping my voice even. "Really beautiful property." "It better be for what Dan's paying," Kevin said, swirling his drink. "But hey, it's worth it. After tonight, I'm officially a Fisher. Dan's already talking about making me operations director. By this time next year, I'll be running the whole show." He leaned in closer. "You know what Dad told me last night?" He said, "Son, we always knew you'd be the one to make this family proud. Can you believe that?" I could, actually. I could believe it completely. "That's great, Kevin," I said. "I hope it all works out the way you planned." He missed the subtext entirely. He always did. The ceremony was tasteful. Megan looked beautiful. I felt a genuine pang of sympathy for her. She had no idea who she was marrying. During the vows, Kevin's voice cracked when he promised to be honest and faithful, and my mother sobbed in the front row. I kept my face neutral. At the reception, Dan Fisher gave a toast. He talked about welcoming Kevin into the family, about building something together, about trust being the foundation of any good business. Kevin beamed. My parents beamed harder. They'd done it. Their golden boy had landed the golden ticket. Then, during the dinner, while Kevin was making the rounds, shaking hands and accepting congratulations like a politician on election night, I excused myself and found Dan Fisher standing alone by the bar, nursing a bourbon. "Mr. Fisher," I said, "I'm Rachel, Kevin's sister." He looked surprised. "Kevin has a sister?" "He's never mentioned." He stopped himself, embarrassed. "I'm sorry. That came out wrong." "It didn't," I said. "It came out honest. And I respect honesty, which is why I want to give you something." I placed the envelope on the bar beside his glass. "Don't open it tonight. It'll ruin the evening. Open it Monday morning, before your 10 a.m. meeting." He looked at the envelope, then at me. "What is this?" "Something you need to see. Something someone who cares about your daughter would want you to know before it's too late." I walked away before he could ask more. I found Nate at our table, squeezed his hand, and whispered, "It's done." We stayed through dessert. We danced one dance. We left quietly, without saying goodbye to my parents or Kevin. Nobody noticed. That was fine. They'd notice soon enough. The following Monday, Dan Fisher opened the envelope. By Tuesday, he had cross-referenced every piece of information with his own records. By Wednesday, he called Tom Pratt and confirmed what the audit had already proven. By Thursday, Dan Fisher walked into the flagship location at 7 a.m. before the shop opened, with his lawyer, his accountant, and 2 police officers. Kevin was arrested at his desk. He was still wearing his wedding ring. It was 9 days old. The charges were embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Donna Vickers was arrested the same morning at her home. Kevin's bail was set at $75,000. My parents couldn't pay it. They had already drained everything for the wedding. My mother called me that Thursday afternoon, hysterical. "Rachel, you have to help. Kevin's in jail. He didn't do anything wrong. That man Dan set him up because he was jealous of Kevin's talent. Please, You have to get him a lawyer. You have to. Mom, I said. Kevin stole $155,000 from his father-in-law's company through a fake vendor scheme? It's documented. The evidence is overwhelming. Silence. Then, how do you know that? Because I'm the forensic investigator who found it. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard from my mother. Then she screamed. She called me a traitor. She said I'd destroyed the family. She said I'd always been jealous of Kevin. She said things I won't repeat because some words, once spoken, can never be unheard. I let her finish. Then I said, I didn't destroy anything, Mom. I just stopped pretending it wasn't already broken. She hung up. Megan filed for annulment within 2 weeks. She'd had no knowledge of the scheme, and Dan's lawyers confirmed that quickly. I felt for her. She'd married a man she thought she knew. I understood that kind of betrayal not from a spouse, but from a family. Different relationship, same lie. Kevin took a plea deal. 2 years in federal prison plus full restitution. The judge noted that the scheme was sophisticated enough to indicate premeditation but sloppy enough to suggest arrogance. I thought that was the most accurate description of my brother I'd ever heard. My parents' finances collapsed in the aftermath. Without Kevin's promised position at Fisher Auto, the investment logic evaporated. They couldn't make payments on the home equity line. They couldn't service the business loan. Within 4 months, the house went into foreclosure. I could have helped them. I had the means. Nate and I had discussed it. But helping them would have meant absorbing the consequences of decisions they made while treating me like an afterthought for 30 years. It would have meant validating the belief that I existed to clean up messes I didn't make. So, instead, I offered them something different. When the house went to auction, Nate bought it. He paid fair market value. My parents found out when they saw the county transfer records. My mother called me, her voice barely a whisper. You bought our house? Nate bought a property at a public auction, I said. It's a good location. What are you going to do with it? She asked. And for the first time in my life, I heard fear in her voice. I told her the truth. Nate and I were converting it into transitional housing for young women aging out of the foster care system. Women who had no family safety net. Women who had been told their whole lives that they weren't worth investing in. The renovation was already underway. We were partnering with a local nonprofit. The first residents would move in by spring. My mother was quiet for a long time. Then she said, You were always so cold, Rachel. No, Mom, I said. I was always so careful. You just never noticed the difference. I drove by the house last week. The renovation is nearly complete. New paint, new windows, a garden out front that Nate planted himself. There's a small wooden sign by the front door. It reads, Torres House, because everyone deserves a foundation. My parents are renting an apartment across town. My father's landscaping business is smaller now, but stable. They haven't called me since the house was sold. Kevin writes me letters from prison sometimes. They're mostly complaints. He still doesn't understand what he did wrong. He thinks he was unlucky, not unethical. That's the thing about golden children, they're so used to being told they're special that they can't distinguish between confidence and fraud. Megan reached out to me last month, unexpectedly. She wanted to thank me. She said that discovering the truth, as painful as it was, saved her from building a life on a lie. We met for coffee. She's doing well. She's strong in a way that heartbreak sometimes forces people to become. And me? I'm sitting in my home office, the same one Kevin sneered at, working on a new case. Nate is downstairs, sketching plans for our next project, a community workshop space in a building he renovated downtown. The house smells like coffee and sawdust, which is my favorite combination in the world. I used to think being the responsible one was a punishment. I used to resent the checkbook, the bill payments, the endless invisible labor. But those skills didn't just make me good at my job. They made me impossible to fool. My family spent 30 years teaching me to see through financial lies. They just never expected me to use that education on them. They wanted me to be useful. They wanted me to be quiet. They wanted me to sit at the back table and keep my mouth shut while the golden child glittered. So I did. I sat quietly. I watched carefully. And when the glitter turned out to be gold paint over rust, I was the only one in the room who wasn't surprised. If you're the scapegoat in your family, if you're the one who gives and never gets recognized, I want you to hear this. Your invisibility is not your weakness. It's your superpower. Nobody watches the person they've already dismissed. And that means nobody sees you coming. They didn't see me coming. And by the time they did, I was already holding all the receipts.